Good day, everybody. Now let's try to learn another topic or another lesson for this particular unit. This time, we talk about the core values of counseling. So, we have already talked about the basic concepts of counseling as well as the goals, aims, and scope of counseling. This time, let's deepen those understandings by talking about the core values of counseling. What sets this particular discipline apart from any other discipline that we get to discuss in this particular subject? So for this lesson class, we are going to be talking by being guided by these principles. Counselors, like any person whose job is to help people, should practice with their clients' best interest in mind. This means adhering to a standard or code of conduct that protects the clients from any harm as well as promote their well-being. Meaning to say, in counseling, the role of the counselor is mainly the welfare of his or her client. That should be what is in mind of the counselor when conducting the process of counseling. Now, for this lesson, we are going to target the objective of being able to discuss the core values and ethical principles of counseling. All right, let's begin with our discussion. And as we do not forget to have your notebooks with you to jot down important key discussions and questions that may arise as we have this discussion. Jot it down so that you may be able to raise them during online discussions. All right. Now, class, with this particular lesson, we need to remember a very important question. How will the general core values and ethical principles of counseling affect the decision-making process of a counselor? Remember that the main actor in this lesson is the counselor, as much as the counselee or the client or the patient is the one that is being considered. Most importantly, it is the counselor who is given the responsibilities to possess these values and ethical principles, especially during conducting the process of counseling. Anyway, these processes or these values, core values and ethical principles helps a particular individual navigate through the different facets of life. All right, so let's begin. There are general core values of counseling. There's a set of personal qualities that all practitioners should possess. This lesson, we are going to base these set of personal qualities of the general core values of counseling from the ethical framework for good practice of the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. Let's begin with the first general core value of counseling: sincerity. Sincerity in the context of staying true to what has been vowed or promised to do for the client. If we are going to conduct now the process of counseling, we need to remember that the interest of our client should be our topmost priority. Therefore, we as counselors must possess sincerity in order for us to stay true to the commitment for the benefit of our client. Integrity. Integrity means being honest, straightforward, and easily understandable. Thus, always consider what is morally correct in all of the actions. Meaning to say, when we show integrity in the process of counseling, we need to remember that we need to be morally correct in all of the actions that are involved in order for us to justify the desired traits, behaviors, and mindset or attitudes that we want our clients to possess. Resilience. Resilience is the capacity of the counselor to work with the client without feeling emotionally drained. When you're going to discuss a particular issue, dilemma, or problem with the client, you are investing a huge portion of yourself emotionally, not just intellectually. Therefore, the tendency for you to be emotionally drained is very, very high, or is very, very possible. Resilience class helps us to become emotionally invested but not get emotionally drained with the process of counseling. You know your footing and you know your grounds. Most of all, you know when to pull yourself out of that emotional investment that you are making with your client as you conduct counseling. Humility. Humility is a very important aspect in the process of counseling because this is when you acknowledge your own strengths and weaknesses in terms of dealing with the client's issues or dilemmas. We are never experts of everything, meaning to say we may be jack of all trades, but remember, we will never be a master of one. If you are a jack of all trades, it's a given that you are a master of none. So we must have the humility to acknowledge the points where we are strong and the points where we are weak, or we need to have more improvement or more understanding of our capabilities. This means that when a client presents a particular issue or dilemma that is out of our control and out of our area of expertise, we must have the humility to make sure that the client still feels secured in the way we conduct the process of counseling without jeopardizing the other core values of counseling. So humility now is acknowledging, not just identifying your strengths and weaknesses, but to acknowledge them, to grow out of them, and to improve in order for you to be more confident in the weaknesses that you acknowledge or the weaknesses that you identify. Competence. This is effectively implemented methods, or these are effectively implemented methods and techniques in one's work. This shows the skill that would be useful depending on the action planned during the counseling process. Counseling now, class, is not only a set of intellectual capacities that you're able to bring forth in the table. Competence means that you are able to implement different methodologies or different techniques in order for you to navigate which skills are useful depending on the situation that will be brought by the client or that will be derived into in the process of counseling. Fairness is being able to consistently apply the appropriate criteria in addressing the issues that the clients face. Fairness is not only looking into how the clients are affected, but also how the clients affect the circumstance that he or she is in. How the client's response or mindset would also affect the environment and the people that he or she is in order for the client to address better the issues that he or she is facing. Wisdom. Wisdom has enough knowledge to make sound judgments regarding any given situation. If we conduct counseling hastily or conduct counseling carelessly, irresponsibly, and impatiently, then ultimately wisdom will be lacklustered. Wisdom will be lacking, and it will not become sufficient to what the situation calls for. Meaning to say, if we possess wisdom, there is a depth identification of what the client's issues are, what the client's dilemmas are, and what are the possible solutions that the client can derive out of the counseling session that you are doing. It also implies that when you have wisdom, you are able to make sound judgments regarding the given situation. That does not really imply you to become biased about the issue or biased about the situation. Courage. Courage is the ability to perform one's work in spite of possible fears, risks, and uncertainty. When you conduct counseling, you do not know what will become the outcome, the concrete, the tangible outcome of that certain process or session. You must have the courage in order for you to do your job and make sure that you're able to overcome possible risk factors that may lead to a lot of uncertainties before and after you conduct counseling. But what is important is that you're able to have this manifestation of doing the job right. Respect for human dignity. In counseling class, we need to acknowledge that each client's individuality and personhood is varying. There are unique qualities, unique traits and attitudes, and unique behaviors that you can see. Therefore, we must always consider human dignity in what we are doing. Partnership. This helps us to refrain from dictating what the client should do, but to instead collaborate with the client. Remember that when conducting counseling, you are not going to dictate or you're not going to give the client a list of to do or do's and don'ts. Instead, you're going to invest in the issue, invest in listening and talking to the client in order for the client to be able to drive best or alternative practices that will lead to solutions in a long-term gain. Therefore, this will require partnership between the counselor and the client. This will need collaboration in order for the counselor and the client to come up with processes to achieve desirable attitudes and desirable behaviors. Now, here are ethical principles of counseling. According to Kitchener in 1984 and MacLeod in 2003, there are 5 moral principles in counseling. These are the principle of autonomy, the principle of non-maleficence and beneficence, the principle of justice, and the principle of fidelity. The principle of autonomy talks about giving the freedom of choice to the clients. The only exception is from children and those with mental disabilities. Now, in talking about informed consent, this is unethical to proceed to counseling without the consent of the client. Therefore, when you are going to conduct counseling, it must be a given or it must be freely decided by both the counselor and the client. Meaning to say, we are going to give now the freedom of choice to the client whether he or she wants to undergo counseling, whether he or she wants to listen to your opinions, to your possible solutions to the problem, or not. Principle of non-maleficence and beneficence. This is the technique and methods in the process of counseling. Remember that these techniques and methods must not harm the client, which is maleficence. Similar to the principle of responsible caring, this leads to the awareness of the benefits and also the possible dangers of a particular plan of action. Now, this is beneficence. We must always remember that the well-being and the welfare of the client is the topmost priority. Therefore, techniques and methods as well as principles should always be centered into the responsible caring as well as the harmless process of counseling. Principle of justice talks about fair distribution of resources and services. Counseling must not be non-discriminatory. Instead, counseling must always look into the depth of the issue as well as how the client is able to manage the certain issues that will affect him or her directly or indirectly. Principle of fidelity talks about loyalty, reliability, dependability, and action in good faith. This means that the counselor must be transparent to the client the entire counseling process. We are going to become loyal to the clients. We see or we let ourselves become reliable in what we bring to the counseling process, the methods and techniques. We are able to be depended upon by the clients in what they are going to present as their problems or dilemmas, and we always make actions out of good faith for the benefit of the success of the counseling process. Now, what is the relevance of knowing these core values and ethical principles of counseling as a counselor or as a client? This will help us understand better what are the things to do and the things to avoid and to look into carefully during the process of counseling. which helps us to derive more positive and productive outputs out of these exhausting and tiresome process. Now let's try to wrap up our discussion. Remember that the core values of counseling must be upheld to protect both the client and the counselor's welfare. The BACP Ethical Framework for Good Practice identified a set of personal qualities that all practitioners should possess. These are sincerity, integrity, resilience, humility, competence, fairness, wisdom, and courage. Partnership, according to Corey in 2017, and Respect for Human Dignity by Zetro in 2017, Hall and Hurley in 2003, are two more important core values of counseling. The 5 ethical principles of counseling were identified by Kitchener in 1984. These are autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, justice, and fidelity. Pope and Vasquez in 2010 also mentioned responsible caring as an important principle or core value in counseling. Remember that these general core values and ethical principles guide counselors in the process of counseling with their clients. The application of these core values may differ depending on the circumstances during the counseling process. However, these are the virtues they must uphold at all times. Now, if there are any possible questions that may come into the listening of this discussion, make sure that you are able to jot them down so that we can discuss them on the lessons of during our online classes. And with that being said, God bless and keep safe.